Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Buyer's Guide to Generative AI. Thank you so much for investing this time with us and our industry leaders. If you are an APMP member, this webinar will apply toward your continuing education units for certification. As with all Shipley webinars, this presentation will be uploaded to our website by tomorrow, so please share with your colleagues and anyone who might benefit from today's discussion. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the Questions tab in your control panel. We will answer as many as we can in a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We have two experts joining us today. Vishwas Lele is the Chief Technology Officer at PWin AI, where he leads the development of their pioneering AI-driven proposal development tool. Amy McGeady is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Services at Shipley Associates. She provides leadership for Shipley strategy and process offerings that help clients optimize business development practices for sustainable, winning results, and successful teams. Amy has been a proposal manager, a proposal center director in a Fortune 100 company, a small business owner, and a nonprofit CEO and CSO. She currently serves on the APMP Board of Directors. She has demonstrated success growing businesses and nonprofits in multiple market sectors. She has expertise in a wide range of business development functions, including strategic positioning, proposal management, process optimization, and team building. Thank you, Amy and Vishwas, for being on our panel today. And with that, I'll hand control of the webinar to Amy.
Thank you, Mallory. As we get started with our Buyer's Guide to Generative AI, I want to preview what we'll be talking about. First, we'll be talking about, is your organization AI ready? We'll be talking about the decision of whether to build or to buy. We'll share some key criteria for selecting an AI proposal tool. We'll talk through how to get through the buying process, and then end with some red flags that you should watch out for as you make this decision. So, we know that AI is transforming how organizations develop proposals, but with so many tools available, how do we choose the right one? So today we're going to talk about some key factors to consider when selecting an AI proposal tool and how to ensure that your organization is ready for adoption. So Vishwas, as we get started, many organizations see AI as a quick fix. Buy the tool and watch it work. But is that really the case? What are some deeper considerations to keep in mind when evaluating AI tools?
Yeah, no, thank you, Amy. So we do believe that adopting a generative AI tool for a complicated business process like proposal writing, that goes beyond then just purchasing a tool and flipping a switch. And we think that adopting a generative AI tool is more like a partnership where your organization gets more value out of the tool as you mature your processes, right? So let me give you a few examples. Of course, data we know is very important. And there's this aspect of continuous learning of the data. How do you continue to improve your knowledge repository? And that has a direct impact on the quality of writing that these tools produce. You have to think about ethics, you have to think about biases, you have to think about hallucinations. Is your information accurate, given the importance of accuracy in everything that we are doing here? Then you also have to think about, Amy, this field is evolving rapidly. One thing we have learned from the last 12 months, and we talked about this in our last webinar as well, things are evolving rapidly. How do you take into account the progress that is being made? And of course, you have issues of security and privacy that we'll get into later on. And then above all, are you getting the return of investment that you've made in the tool? And the last point I will say, and we'll dig into many of these topics into detail later, the last point I will say is, yes, you have AI trying to get data from multiple sources, bring them into a knowledge repository. So you're bringing this data, but equally important is the collaboration between the various teams who are going to be using this tool. So that's going to be important, Amy.
Well, I love that you talk about this as picking a partner for our team. So this really sets us up well for this conversation. So before we dive in deeper about technology, I also want to talk about some leadership considerations during the buying journey. one of the most important things we can do when making a buying decision like picking an AI solution is really thinking through and having clarity about our goals. Why are we considering adding generative AI to our team? From a financial and a leadership perspective, the main goal of using generative AI is often to boost efficiency. Whether it's by reducing costs or enabling the same team to just do more. But true success, it's not just about speed and volume. The right tools should also be enhancing our competitiveness, making our quality and our strategies stronger. So more wins, more proposals, those are things we hear about a lot. But another key objective that we hear buyers or some of our really smart sophisticated buyers talking about is content reuse. That AI driven content management makes it easier to retrieve, refine, and reuse past responses for consistency and also for knowledge sharing. So, all of this means that we're not just submitting more proposals, we're submitting proposals that score higher and win more, and we're leveraging and enhancing our content libraries to really support our teams. All of this helps us as leaders make proposal professionals, put them in a position where they can really showcase their unique skills. So, one of the main parts of our buyer guide is just really thinking through, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish with this technology? And then really thinking through, are you really ready for it? So in terms of, thinking of your AI readiness, we know that AI is continuing to reshape business development. Vishwas, you mentioned how fast the technology is moving. I also think we just see it moving in our industry quickly as well. So, a few key considerations when you're thinking through, is my team, my organization ready to make this buying decision? The first is, do you have structured proposal processes? Because AI really thrives on repeatable workflows. So if you have defined workflows now, that's great. If your workflows are more ad hoc or more reliant on individuals and how they like to work, you can also use AI to help you get there, but just make sure you identify a solution that's designed to do this. Second, is your content library well structured? AI can help retrieve and enhance content, but it can't fix a messy library. So if your content is outdated, if it's scattered, if it's frankly full of repetitive and duplicative content, AI, it may just amplify some of the challenges with your current content management. And then third, are your stakeholders open to AI driven workflows? AI adoption, it's not just about the tools, it's about people. So if your teams aren't ready to change how they work, and as a leader, if you're not ready to support them on this journey that requires some level of trial and error, even the best AI solution isn't going to drive meaningful impact if your users won't adopt it. So I think those are some important things to think about with your AI readiness. And then, when you think about when does AI make the most sense, if you're handling a high volume of proposals, and this can be a high volume, frankly, even just relative to the size of your team, AI can really help you reduce repetitive tasks. If you're under pressure to deliver proposals faster, whether that's from your internal organization or from your clients. AI can really help you speed up content generation and compliance checks. And then if content reuse is a real struggle, or you don't really know how to transfer knowledge to new team members, AI can really surface the best past responses and improve consistency across proposals. So AI, it's not a magic bullet. Is best when built on a strong foundation of process, of content, of people who are all ready to embrace new ways of working. And the more prepared you are, the more AI can help you win. So we encourage you to keep this in mind as we start to talk about how to evaluate tools. I do want to highlight one thing, Vishwas. One thing that I think is a little less intuitive for some of us is really the importance of content for AI response system. So before we move on, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Amy, you covered it really well. You talked about duplicative information and inadvertently telling the AI that this piece of information is somehow more important because it's just taking that signal So you gave that example, and I can extend that by saying that it is also very important when you're buying a tool like this to figure out how the information is being chunked up. Uh, is it being broken up into the right boundaries? And why is that important? Because when we go to retrieve this information from your knowledge repository, you want to make sure that the information that's being returned is precise and it's not irrelevant, because that will lead to a poor quality response. So, as you're going through the buying cycle, it's important to understand how your proposal library content is being broken up, being curated, and being frankly tagged so that the AI is getting the right information. So I'll give you another example. If your documents are not having the proper metadata, are not having the proper categorization, then we go retrieve these documents and we'll find that you're not getting the right content because it has not been filtered on the right set of criteria. And that can lead to uh, lower quality responses or responses that are not particularly relevant or complete. So these are some of the considerations that you have to keep in mind when you're talking about your content library.
Yeah, thanks, Vishwas. Our industry has been talking about knowledge management and content management for a really long time, but I think generative AI really adds a new dimension to that. So, thanks for helping us understand that a little bit better. When considering implementing AI in proposal writing, some organizations, especially larger ones, are really faced with the decision of, do I build a custom solution in-house, or do I invest in tools designed by industry experts? So, Vishwas, can you share what you have told so many potential customers who are weighing this decision?
Yes, Amy, anytime an organization decides to go with the build option, uh, they need to understand the complexity involved in building a tool like that. In fact, Amy, if you go to the next slide, uh, I have some additional bullets for us to talk about here, right? So we know that getting started with generative AI is easy, right? You can write an English language-based prompt, and the quality of models that we have available today, you're going to get some response back from it. But what you have to ask yourself is that exactly the right, precise answer that you're looking for? Did somebody perform a hallucination check on the data that was retrieved? Are we managing the prompt correctly? Because we know that if the prompt size keeps growing, the quality deteriorates, right? So as you can see, in order to do these things, this requires some really hard engineering to undertake these things. So what this ultimately means is that you need a team. If you're trying to build this in-house, you need a team of specialized skills and resources. You need high quality data scientists. You need MLOps engineers, and then we talked about how these models are advancing quickly. So now we are into more sort of reasoning models. We talked about that in the last webinar, Amy, O and O3 reasoning models. And what is interesting, and people may not realize this, is you may have perfected your prompt for a 4 turbo or a 4.0 model, but that prompt may be suboptimal for a reasoning model because reasoning model is applying its own view on top of the prompt, right? So you have to keep thinking about it. So it's not just the initial investment cost, but it is also the cost of keeping up with the growing uh, capability of these models. And what, Amy, this translates into these skills that you need, the ongoing cost that you need. So it becomes quite an expensive endeavor, and you really have to ask yourself, what's the mission of this organization? Who's the customer that you're trying to serve? And if you find that this is not your core mission, then you'll find that you have the inability to dedicate full-time resources. I was just talking to uh, a customer yesterday. They went down the route of building a tool like this for a few months, but then two of their key engineers got pulled into a really critical project that they were undertaking, right? And that can happen. So as a result, they had a setback in where they wanted to be. Of course, you want a certain capability of features, and the final point I'll make is, Amy, is with these tools, we see a large number of people adopting uh, AI for at least generating the first draft. And if your competitors are using this tool, it becomes a part of your defensive strategy, that are you able to give your teams the same capability of features for your teams to be competitive with uh, the other people who may be placing bids on the same RFPs that you're going after.
Mm. Well, and visualize all of that. It just seems like there's so many complexities. There's a lot of moving and dynamic pieces of this. So it seems like you're like one of the challenges just getting to start to build. Then there's a maintenance challenge, and that can be, like you mentioned, dependent on your own team's ability to maintain and evolve the technology, but also the models themselves and keeping up with how that evolves. So the people building purpose built solutions are keeping up with all of those things. So those are great things to be considering. So we talked about build versus buy, but some out there may be thinking, well, okay, I don't need to build something, but I also don't need to buy a specialized solution. Why can't I just use some general purpose chatbots like ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft Copilot? So, visualize, what are the risks of using a general AI chatbot?
Yeah, and before I answer that question, Amy, I will say that I love generic chatbots. I personally pay for 2 or 3 different generic chatbots. I use
Me
them
too.
for all kinds of YouTube. Yes, Amy. So this is not a comparison or saying that one tool is not right or can serve the purpose here. What we are trying to say here is generic chatbots are great. I use them absolutely for writing tasks, for taking minutes from the meeting, and many other use cases that I'm sure our audiences can think of. But where you start thinking about uh, writing long form content, which goes into multiple pages long, that's where you start seeing some struggles with being able to maintain coherence across a large document that can be generated. Of course, these models are not built on all of the proposal best practices. A lot of these proposal best practices are internal to an organization or internal to Shipley, and frankly, in some cases, those chatbots are not just trained on that data. And keep in mind that other than sort of comparing with generic chatbots, there are a whole host of features that purpose-built co-pilots like Pwin offer. For example, the compliance matrix generation, or trying to comprehend all of the evaluation instructions, all of the task details, and then coming up with a compliant response outline, thinking about a structured approach of how you craft the prompts so that all of those objectives are well balanced. So those are some of the things that a purpose built tool would do. And not to mention, last but certainly not the least, is the integration into your existing systems. So many of you have uh, lots of SharePoint libraries for lots of documents in them, but we know that you can search for a document, then the entire document comes up. You have to go find that document, find the relevant section in that, and maybe copy and paste that as part of your prompt. So all of that integration work, think of that as well as the cost of using a generic chatbot versus a purpose-built tool.
Well, as we think about criteria, not all AI tools are created equal. So it's important that we have evaluation criteria. And some of the things we recommend and we know are the most important as people look to buy an AI solution, the first is security and compliance, that you need enterprise grade security that safeguards confidential data. And doing this within private environments with robust access controls and multi-factor authentication. So your data should never be used to train AI models. So that's a really important evaluation criteria. The second is scalability. It's really critical that your tool can expand with you as your business expands, that your tool has to be able to handle increased proposal volumes, because you're going to be producing more proposals once you have a generative AI solution integrated into your proposal team. You'll have evolving compliance needs, and there'll be growing team collaboration needs that you'll want without compromising efficiency or performance. So those are a few of the criteria. Visualize, can you talk a little bit more about technology and integration criteria?
Sure, Amy. Not all AI tools are created the same. We know that. In fact, it is relatively simple to build a ChatGPT wrapper, right? So build some UI where you cut and paste the questions from an RFP or a task description from an RFP. You do some bit of prompt engineering and put a RAG pattern in the back. And it's not that difficult to build a tool like this. But again, once you're evaluating, you're looking at the criteria for selecting a tool, think about, does your tool reason through the best way to respond to a section? Does it look at the past performance? Does it look at the competitors? Does it look at the win themes? Does it have a robust mechanism of doing hallucination check and giving you uh, an indication of how accurate that content is? And then, of course, not to forget, does the tool follow the best practices of proposal writing? And Amy, I'll just say that we are fortunate to have Shipley. It's the only tool in the market with Shipley inside. And some things which I'm sure you can speak to much better than I can, but think about using a disciplined, customer-focused writing approach. Think about how you can restate the needs in the RFP within your own style, at the same time retaining the customer's ownership of the problem statement. Uh, think about how your outline should mimic the organization's priorities. They might have put out a document about their priorities. These are all things that best practices that Shipley has been teaching for decades, right? Is your tool doing those kinds of things? So that's what I mean by technology and the expertise. And I'll quickly add this, Amy, and then hand it back to you. Also think in terms of integration, right? Proposal teams out there have spent a lot of time and money and energy in building a tool chain for pushing these proposals out to the finish line, right? So they have workflows where they assign people certain tasks, they have project management tools. They don't want to necessarily disrupt those tool chain that they've already set up. So is your tool going to integrate with the existing investment that has been made? If these tools do, then there's a higher likelihood of your teams using these tools without being disrupted from their current process that they know about.
Well, and Vishwas, I think it was the last slide or the slide before, you also highlighted return on investment. Of course, that's a really important criteria. Are you able to gain the efficiencies that you want? Are your win rates going to go up with this tool? Are you ultimately saving money? I think those are some great goals. Some returns on your investment of generative AI. I think in the short term, there's some things you can do to benchmark where you are today, and really measure over time how you're gaining either quality or efficiency. Hopefully, you're getting both. And then that will change as you do things like improve your content, as your team becomes better trained, etc. But so these are some good criteria as people evaluate generative AI solutions for our industry. And one of the things that we didn't have on that slide, but that we think is also one of the most important criteria, is really responsible AI. So Vishwas, can you help us understand a little bit more about what do we need to know as we evaluate solutions and we think about responsible AI?
Amy, this is such an important topic that we look forward to, in fact, presenting at one of the APMP events coming up. It's such an important topic. We know that the sensitivity of the information that you're dealing with, we know the importance of security, we know the importance of accuracy. This is why responsible AI is so important in any tool that you're looking at. And I'm proud to say that our work on PWIN, from day one, we have been focusing on important pillars of responsible AI. And let me just walk you through them. The first is, of course, data assurance. You want to make sure that all of the data that you have is following strict government security standards and is undergoing external audits. And what I want to emphasize here is it is not enough to say that by our tool, we will install our tool in your enclave, and now it is your responsibility to it will be managed under the security regime of the rest of your infrastructure. It's important to have these certifications. It's important to have an external audit done against the various subsystems that make up your tool. So that's one. The other thing is, uh, of course, you expect your data to be isolated, even if it is in a SaaS environment. We have gone beyond sort of the data isolation. And in fact, we isolate all the way down from compute down to network. So making sure that your data remains and secure and protected from unauthorized access. So that's number one, data assurance, important tenet of responsible AI. The second thing is traceability and validation. And this goes to the principle of if you're using AI as an assistant, you should be aware of how this information was sourced. So if a certain section or a draft is generated, you should be very clear about which documents, which sections of the document were used to create this draft. So traceability of information is very important. And we know that even if you tell these models explicitly to not go outside your content library, they have a tendency to sometimes produce inaccurate information. So, do you have some sort of a validation loop where you're taking important assertions that may be made in the document that's being generated, and then you're checking that against the ground reality and saying, is this true or not? So, data assurance, traceability, and validation. And the last one, and equally important, is the human led aspect, right? We have talked about on this webinar a number of times that it is all about assistive technology. Are you in control? Are you the one setting the vision for the response that is being generated? Is the content that is being used to generate the response, is it directly being sourced from your organization's content library? Is it your voice? Is it your understanding of the motivation why this RFP was issued? Because everybody who's applying or bidding for the same RFP has a different understanding. How good of a capture have you done? All of those factors should be directly be able to shape how that response is being generated. So if you think about these important tenets, then it's truly a case of responsible AI because you are as a proposal team are in front and center in control of what the content is being generated.
Thank you. Thanks for helping us understand that a little bit better as we go into our evaluations. Now we've explored several key selection criteria for an AI assisted proposal writing tool. Let's talk about how we actually evaluate solutions effectively. So in product demos, people often focus on the basics. We hear questions about price, will it populate my templates? But to truly make an informed decision, we think you need to dig deeper. So, Vishwas, we've talked to so many people in demos over the last year. Can you walk us through, what are some of the key questions that you've heard people ask? And can you share some of the questions we know that buyers should be asking so that they can ensure that the tool is actually going to accomplish their objectives and really address their needs?
Yeah, Amy, we see a lot of questions that are based on a traditional software buying cycle. So people want to know how many licenses am I getting? People want to know what is the price I'm paying? Is the draft that is being generated, is it in my branded template? Of course, they want to talk about security. These are all good questions. But if you are dealing with buying a generative AI product, my suggestion is to go beyond these questions. Of course, these questions are important. You should get answers to these. But then think about, is this solving the specific problem I have? Here's my content library. Here's my state of content library. These are the kinds of RFPs that I'm bidding on. Is it following the industry uh, proposal best practices? Will it work with the workflow and the tool chain that we talked about in the previous slide? Will it integrate with those things? And last but not the least is we find that generative AI, given the state it is in, Amy, it is really important to understand what kind of training is going to be available. And we are certainly through this webinar sharing with the community here the lessons that we are learning in the building this tool and sort of the best practices. That's going to be an important part as you go through a purchase cycle.
Yeah, I think that that's great. And even if you don't ask all of these questions, I think one also thing to just consider for yourself is this technology solution going to help me evolve my proposal center operations? As the industry keeps evolving and moving forward, does this solution appear to help me stay on top of all that and remain competitive in this industry? So it might not be a question you directly ask a vendor, but definitely something to be thinking about. So, when evaluating proposal tools, you're going to have an overwhelming amount of information. There's a lot of marketing materials, we have features lists, we have vendor claims, and it's really critical that we can cut through all of this noise and focus on what truly matters to us. So, some tips that we have for analyzing this flood of information, we've talked throughout this of having criteria that are derived from what do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? What should I be looking for in terms of responsible AI and what the technology can and should provide to me? But, really, as you filter information, I think one of the primary lenses to be looking through is your team's needs, your workflows, and create a short list of a set of tools that meet these things. So, as you filter on criteria, thinking through what are your needs, what are the quality of responses that this tool is capable of producing, does it produce compliant content, and then issues of security that are going to be so critical for your team and your success. So, to Vishwas's point earlier, AI generated responses should end up with a greater standard than what you're getting right now from ChatGPT, who we both are fans of, or any other general purpose chatbot. You want something that is writing to our industry standards, of course, using Shipley standards and an emphasis on customer focus really will help you be able to meet complex requirements and generate proposals that are not just compliant, but are also compelling. So look for certifications that match the type of bids your organization works on so that you'll know, are you in compliance with the standards? For example, if you're a federal government contractor, are you in compliance with the standards and requirements for vendor tools that your customer requires? Many organizations invest in AI tools for proposal writing only to find out that they end up as shelfware. And what we mean by shelfware is a software that is purchased that is either rarely used or never used. And none of us want that. So, that happens when the tool fails to deliver real value to the users. We've talked a lot about value to the business, but the users who are going to be using your AI solution need to see value day to day to want to continue to use it, and frankly, to be willing to go through the learning curve that any new technology requires. So, Vishwas, are there any signs that we could be watching for that are an early warning sign when we're evaluating a solution that, this is something that could end up going unused and becoming shelfware?
Yeah, definitely, Amy. And as a software developer in my previous professional life, I'm leery about writing software that can end up as a shelfware. So here, some few things for you to consider. Maybe early signs why this software may not get used in the manner that you're approaching it. First and foremost, interoperability with existing systems. We know that many proposals teams live in SharePoint or use Office documents like Excel. If your tool is not interoperating with these existing systems, now you're creating a barrier and may lead to some friction, which reduces adoption eventually. The other one is the low usability. We don't want to add cognitive load. We know that proposal teams are already super busy, and if you tell them you need to attend 2-day classes to just come up to speed with the software, Amy, I'm sure you can tell me that's not going to happen given how busy proposal teams are. The other sign is inadequate functionality. So maybe you have a superficial approach to shredding an RFP, right? All you're doing is a keyword search on shalls and wills that's causing a lot of noise, not really shredding the RFP in a true sense of comprehending the instructions. So there's inadequate functionality. People might say, oh, I could have done this on my own using this simple little widget that I have in the past. Why am I using this tool? So keep in mind about inadequate functionality. Amy, the flip side of inadequate functionality is too many features. And you have to be careful that some of those bells and whistles may not really add up to much. So, for example, there may be buttons which say, hey, summarize this paragraph for me, or write it in a positive tone, or I'm going to give you a web page. Read that web page and be ready to answer these questions. They may seem like a lot of bells and whistles, but keep in mind that these features are increasingly part of your office productivity suite every day. We talked about the generic chatbots. So having those features in a long list of a feature sheet for a proposal tool may not give you a lot of value that you may be looking for. Uh, and the last thing I would say is be very mindful of how much time does it take to get the tool up and running? And is there a cost to getting your knowledge repository set up? If there's a non-trivial cost, then you have to ask yourselves, what kind of process? How much is my manual work? Is this being automatically tagged or not? These are all important considerations. And if you look at one of these, it just tells you that it increases the probability of running into friction with using these tools later on. So please be mindful of these things.
And I think if you can overcome all of these things as you're evaluating solutions, one thing I know as we talk with customers that we really encourage people to do is to appoint an AI champion or team of AI champions within your company, people who have some influence over other people in the organization, who are skilled at what they already do and are enthusiastic about adopting AI. Because if you have a solution that, doesn't fall prey to any of these, warning signs that you're giving us, Vishwas, and you have someone that your user community looks to and trusts, I think that your odds of something becoming shelfware go down. If you have someone or a team that's invested in learning and getting everything out of the technology solution that you choose. And if you are thinking about buying AI, we just encourage you not just to think about the technology solution, but to think bigger. AI isn't just a tool. I have heated debates with friends about this, but to me, I think it's not just a tool, it's a transformation. Vishwas, you started us off as it's a partner. And as prospective buyers of AI, we really encourage you to think of your whole change leadership journey. Technology is one critical piece of this, but success requires strong leadership, setting the vision, driving change, optimize data. We've talked about content management so much throughout this, but really AI is only as good as the data that it learns from. Your team training, people will need skills to use this AI effectively. It's really a new way of working, and we want to equip people to really be at the forefront of this new way of working. And then buy-in and adoption. So, without engagement, AI is not going to deliver value. So, buying AI or tech solution is really just the start. The real work is in making it work. So, the starting point for this can be a Shipley Executive AI workshop. It can be an AI training session. And, just really equipping yourself to be a change leader with this technology. One thing that we are excited to share with all of you today for the first time in one of our webinars is a joint consultation with Shipley and our partners at PWin. And if you'd like to talk to us to talk about your AI strategy and making sure your organization is AI ready, we would love to meet with you. There's a QR code here. Please sign up today. If this interests you, we'll only be keeping this open for a short period of time. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Vishwas, thanks also for this conversation. I always learn so much, and I really enjoy getting to talk to you about these things.
Thank you, Amy.